Hello and welcome everybody to Disruption Forum Engineering Horizons. We are so glad to have you here today for our very last event this year. And we are ending this year with a bang because we've got an amazing lineup of speakers from companies like Nubank, Sourcegraph, Akinova, and Wowzy, ready to dive into some of the most exciting topics in engineering right now. We'll be covering, well, basically everything, from building smarter MVPs and cleaning up data to keeping teams motivated and overcoming challenges with staff augmentation. A big shout out to all of our speakers today, and thank you so much for coming to join us and share your expertise. Now, without further ado, let's kick things off with our very first session on smarter product development and getting MVPs right. Grab your coffee and let's get started. Because today I have with me Todd Yates, Chief Technology Officer at Transact, Erika Scherpelz, Head of Engineering at Sourcegraph, and Mahmoud Galal, Software Engineering Manager at Kitopi. My name is Dominika, Szelkenbach, and I will be your host for this session. And in my daily job, I support Netguru clients with various consulting services, which means that I did build quite a few of those MVPs myself, and I know how challenging they can be. So I would love to start today at the very beginning and ask you, how do you decide what should go into your MVP and what shouldn't? How do you find the balance between the features and the speed of development? And Erika, I would love to start with you because I do know you have some insights to share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dominika, and thank you everyone for having us today. So when I think of an MVP, one of the phrases that really sticks with me is simple, lovable, and complete. So an MVP shouldn't try to do anything too exciting. It should be something that customers would actually enjoy using, but it also should solve some problem completely. And what that problem should be something you have a critical question about. It's a risk, or it's an uncertainty, or maybe it's just a disagreement in your team, but the MVP should help you move forward in deciding what to build next. But I'd love to hear what other folks think.
Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's hard to define. I know there's a lot of historical discussion around like what percentage of the project do you need to estimate for MVP. It's really hard to define what percentage is. It's really like Erika said. Spend time with your customers and find out what are the basics that they're looking for in your application and target that. Really defining the scope and design at the front of what you're going to start with is critical to any development to be successful, especially from a startup or a early funding stage.
All right, Mahmoud, how about you?
I totally agree. Like half the solution is finding the right problem to solve, right? So asking the right questions to the customers. Also, like people are sometimes stuck with solutions, right? Love the solution. They need to be able and open to pivot at any moment based on the customer feedback. So you must listen really, really careful to the customers.
Mm-hmm. So you do user research before you design your MVPs?
For sure. Like that's the first step, test, and validate.
Okay. Todd, Erika, you as well? Is user research a standard step?
Not for us. So we're a pretty small and scrappy organization, but what we do is we're building developer tools. So we start with a lot of our internal intuition, but we also know that we're not every developer. So we start by building something we internally find compelling, and then we start pulling in our customers in early access programs to get their feedback early. So we go for more very early feedback than pre-building research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the same for us. We don't have the luxury of kind of creating from zero internally, or even starting off with hey, customer, give us your idea. What we do is we pretty much take an educated guess at what we want, what we think the MVP application needs to be, and then we spend a lot of time validating that with customers to make sure we're on the right track.
Okay. And how do you validate?
Yeah, that's the charge for the design team, right? Making sure that we go through iterative design, and before the first line of code's done, making sure that our UX UI people and our user design research has had a lot of back and forth with clients to make sure we have a complete kind of workflow and design before we turn it over to the devs.
Okay, love it. And do you have any other tools or practices or approaches that you like to utilize when designing your MVPs?
Well, so one just very boring practical one is for us, we are mainly building things within the framework of an existing product. So we rely heavily on feature flags to roll things out to either a limited audience or more often a hand-selected audience who we can walk through the MVP in a way that they can understand its limitations and shortcomings, but also get access to it and play with the real thing and give us feedback directly. So I love feature flags.
Okay.
Yeah.
For us, we are.
Sorry, Mahmoud, go ahead.
For us, we are doing a little bit separate things. Like sometimes we build landing pages and see how the customer will act on this landing pages. We do have like a quite huge number of employees, so sometimes we run things internally to see how the employees will react to the application before going even let's say beta release. And then we do have some segments of the users. That's our alpha. If everything went fine, we go to use feature flag to actually A/B test on a larger segment of users. So there are many ways to validate your ideas.
Todd, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I completely agree with feature flags and what we typically do, depending on what our goal is for the end state of the application is. We try to kind of set levels or expectations with clients, saying that this is going to be the basic software version that's coming out, and then over the next year we're going to release the professional or the elite or whatever nomenclature our design team decides on, but that's all done through feature flags. That we are working on the next set of application features even while we're implementing the MVP.
I would love to also go back to something that Mahmoud said about landing pages. So that made me realize that another way we do MVPs, it's not always building like software. I mean, it's all software in the end, but like we will sometimes utilize sign-up lists as sort of a very cheap MVP to see if there's interest in something from customers. And we're not doing it just to gauge interest. We legitimately will give these people access when we end up building it, but it's a really good way to see, hey, is there a there?
Okay, and I would love to go back, Todd, because you mentioned timelines. Maybe we will release something better next year. Do you have a timeline in your head for how long MVP should take to build and test?
No, that's typically, like I said earlier, I get a lot of pressure, especially from non-technical side of the house, right? For our sales team and our customer implementation team. Tell me a date when you're going to have this feature done. But we typically don't commit to dates or timelines until we've done the research and we know what's going to be minimally viable for the customer. It's hard to kind of guess up front. You can give ballpark estimates of based on your team and capacity and velocity. But until you really have that final kind of wireframe design done and the workflows done, it's really hard to give a finite timeline for that design.
Okay, and this is on the other hand the luxury that we don't have as a service provider that is fully on your side as the client. But I do love to hear it, and I would like to move on. So, how do you decide that the MVP was successful? When do you say, all right, it's good enough, let's start building it? Do you have a specific moment in time or a specific goal that you hit? Erika, maybe let's start with you.
I can jump in. So what I look for most is like when we get like a wow moment or something that starts taking on a life of its own. Like I spent a lot of my career at Google, and there it was all about the metrics. You would put something out, you would do the A/B test. If A did better, you'd go with A. If B did better, you'd go with B. And I love that when you have that scale and that data, it's, kind of a gold standard. But when you don't have that, I think looking for like something where somebody's like really like, I will crawl through glass to get to this MVP, even though it's half baked, and I will hold on to it when you try to take it away from me. Like, and that's a very high bar, but when you hit that level of enthusiasm, you have something worth investing in. So like we're doing some very early API explorations for around AI at Sourcegraph. And we're seeing people who are like, no, don't take this away from me. I know you said this is the early access version and you're changing the API. I don't care. I'll rewrite all my things. Just don't take it away from me. So that's a huge positive side.
Oh, that must be such a great moment. Mahmoud, do you have a similar approach?
So usually it depends on the metrics you add, right? So it depends on the application. So some applications you are looking for retention, you want to run the MVP a little bit more. Critical metrics is the NPS score for the customers that you have. So a lot of feedbacks. Many people create MVPs, but they are like missing adding the analytics, see the conversion rate of your application, see where are the drops in your application, and try to iterate on this like small steps, micro funnels in your application to make things grow better. So this is a common mistake I saw, and like this is where we can add success rate, right? So we add goals in the beginning, and based on the goal we want to achieve, and that's where we want to go.
All right, Todd, what's your wow moment?
Ultimately, for us, it's measuring success for the application as our clients excited about it and willing to pay for it, especially for an MVP, when we launch, our customer implementation process with that. When we see a funnel and a timeline of implementations for that particular software, we know that we've made the right decisions and the right choices because customers are excited about it. That certainly funds and fuels our next level of commitment to building out the rest of the application as well.
All right, thank you. And because we were also talking about it before when we first met, I would love to hear more about your approach to scaling up your MVPs, and how do you decide what's a prototype that can be thrown away, and how do you move from this MVP phase to a full-scale product?
Yeah, I don't think, in the startup world, there's really not the ability to throw away a prototype MVP, right? We're either all in on the MVP or not. And hopefully that we've done our user research up front and know that our time has been well spent. But really, and I hate to kind of keep beating the same drum, but for us, the customer expectation and desire drive all of our production. And so when we are working on MVP, we're working closely with our product owners, designers, sales engineers, implementation engineers, to make sure that we're in the right feedback cycle with the client. And then, like Mahmoud said earlier, we spend a lot of time with our clients making sure that, we've introduced things to them that they're excited about. That cycle doesn't stop. It's not like we stop the design phase and then work on engineering in a vacuum for the next 6 or 7 years, but it's a constant feedback cycle, iterative cycle with the client ongoing.
Right. So if you don't get this wow moment with the customer, we just iterate until we find it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Erika, how about you?
Yeah, I'm also in a startup, so we're in a similar situation. Like once code has touched users, we very rarely throw it away. We iterate on it. But I would have to nuance, like this is certainly not without cost. Like it's great for velocity, but I'll just use a specific example. We have, I'm not even going to guess, at least 5 or 10 places in our code where we're parsing model IDs for different LLM models, because each one of those things started as an MVP that got into the wild and we built on it. So we actually had to step back at some point and say, how do we refactor this? How do we pull this out? So if now we support slashes in addition to colons or whatever you change in your parsing, you don't have to update all those places. So we do tend to mostly take the march inevitably forward approach, but sometimes that means you're building up technical debt that you have to be sure to go back and pay when it starts causing you problems.
Yeah, and how do you manage this technical debt? Is it a set piece of each sprint or a different approach?
That's a great question. So for me, there's two things that I look at. One is I try to encourage my engineering org to build about 25% of project time in for things that will increase engineering velocity in the future.
Okay.
This isn't all refactoring. This includes documentation. This includes testing, the things you should be doing all the time anyway. But it's meant to be generous enough that you feel like you have time to clean things up a little as you go along. The other thing that I really encourage is that if we want to have a project around cleaning up technical debt, it should really have customer and business value too. So for example, this model config parsing thing, what this allows us to do is add new models more quickly because you don't have to update as many locations in the code. And so, yes, it's technical debt reduction, but it's also customer value because they can get models more quickly. So I try to do those two things to kind of provide some balance. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and clean up a big mess, but if you are doing it as you go along, you can get pretty good coverage.
All right. Mahmoud, I would love to hear from you. How do you and your team manage it?
So for technical depths, we are using ADRs while we are designing a project from scratch or agree on architecture at specific. And with every decision we are making, we are writing some sort of historical data, at least for us, like why we took this decision right now and what is the consequences, right? And some of these consequences are tech depths, right? So we keep track of our tech depths. We have backlog of it. And we do have agreement with our stakeholders. We have arrangement that every quarter we do have 20% of our time like tech depths, and we prioritize the tech depths on our roadmap, similar like any other feature. Because in the end, tech depths can bite us, right? So it can really slow us down, really cause a problem that we can spend many months trying to solve it. So we are trying to manage it really, really well.
Okay, Todd, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I'd say a combination of things. So our technical debt we treat just like any other feature. We refine it and prioritize it and keep it on the plan going forward. It's nice to have the capacity to do it a little bit along, but that rarely works, especially when you were in like sales season or what we call our critical feature season, right? So sometimes we just have to kind of take a step and say, look, our technical debt, the weight and value of the improvements from our technical debt would far outweigh us, doing any major feature release this next sprint. So we're just going to take an entire sprint and work on technical debt. That happens occasionally when that builds up in the back, but yeah, that's keeping track of it and treating it just like you would any other issue or request or anything like that is kind of critical to kind of moving the product forward.
So don't sweep it under the rug. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. Keep it at least at the back of your head.
Exactly.
All right. Love it. We have 10 minutes left, and I would like to remind the audience that they can also ask questions to you on the LinkedIn page. So, dear audience, please feel free to do so. And in the meantime, I would like to ask each of you, what was your biggest, let's call it a challenge, not to say a failure, with an MVP that you've designed and developed, and what you learned from it? Can you share? And Mahmoud, maybe let's start with you this time.
Yeah, I would go with choose your audience well. We did a project where we tried some sort of group order, for example, right? And we tried it in offices, right? It worked really well. However, our main audience were not offices, right? We were B2C company. So when we tried to make it in public, it didn't go as much as expected. So at this moment, we had two choices: either to go and change our plans a little bit, expand our segmentation, and go beyond B2C, or to try to adopt the feature to make it more attractive to the customer. And actually, we made pivot in this case, and we tried a little bit to move from being only like a delivery app to become more of social application to support B2C, B2B, B2B2C, and to expand this feature and build application around it. So that was one of the biggest learning, don't stick with one segment, but expand, explore more people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, love it. Erika?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about an MVP in infrastructure because most people don't realize
Please
you
do.
necessarily even do that. And so I'll start with how we failed, and then I'll sneak in a little bit of how we finally succeeded. So we started by building what was really what I would more think of as a proof of concept. It was building out a technical part of the system, but not necessarily something that added any value on its own. So it didn't have that complete aspect of simple, lovable, complete. So that was really our failure, was focusing on building just like a technical proof of concept, which those can be valuable, but they're not the same thing as MVPs. What we ended up doing that was more successful was finding ways to pull out subsets of this large infrastructure project where we could break it up bit by bit. So first we implement ACL checks and see if we can build something there that's compelling. Then we looked for, this was for a social graph application, actually Google Plus for anyone who remembers that. So then we looked for followers and implemented a way to do followers more efficiently. And so we broke it up by actual application functionality, and that was much more successful than trying to break up the MVP into technical pieces.
All right, and I would actually like to build on that, because you clearly differentiated between a proof of concept and an MVP. Can you elaborate on this a little bit? How do you define the boundary between the two?
Yeah, for me, I would say a proof of concept is something that's answering a specific question. It doesn't need to be technical, although it often is. So it's like, can we actually build this? Or like, will this actually get attention in the market? But it's not necessarily something that stands on its own and delivers value. I think an MVP is something that should, even if it's just the tiniest subset of the value you want to deliver, it should deliver at least that subset of the value completely. And if not, then it's more of a proof of concept if it's answering a key question, but it's not delivering value on its own.
Okay, love it. Thank you. Todd, how about your challenges?
Yeah, I would say, recognize where you have a lack of resources or a lack of capability when you start your project. When I took over the roles of CTO for Transact almost 3 years ago now, I had a brand new development team, a really solid DevOps team, and no design team or research team or even product owners. And I was given the task for rebuilding from scratch, major applications. So I looked around and said, I've got a really good skeleton of a dev engineering team, really good DevOps, but no UI UX experience at all on my team. Now I can go out and spend 6 months trying to assemble that, or I can go and work with a partner to come in and kind of set that framework and train my team, and then get the experience kind of handed over to them for the engineering team to make them a little more senior and a little more seasoned in the process. So recognizing the challenges up front will save you a lot of time and heartache in the back end.
Okay, and what did you choose? Did you choose a partner, or did you choose to build it up yourself?
Chose a partner, worked with Netguru.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we had a 6-month design process and training for our product owners that was heavily involved with our clients, and lots of good foundation work for setting up what the project needed to be for MVP, and that was very successful. We grew out our team, but a very successful product launch for 2 years now.
I'm so glad we could help and turn it into a success. It's really great to hear that. We have no questions from our audience. So maybe last very open question. We have 4 minutes left. Is there any last piece of advice that you could give to our listeners on how to build the MVPs right? The one most important thing that comes to mind. Erika.
You don't want to add that. Whatever it is, you're going to try to increase your scope. So you don't want to add that. And you don't want to add that either. I think it's really just keeping that scope constrained, which doesn't mean you can't change as you learn things, but that is always the temptation is, oh, this is critical. We must add that. And then when you step back and look at it, you're like, well, really, that's not critical to an MVP, but you will always be tempted. I am always tempted. Sometimes I give in to that temptation and I regret it. So don't give in to the temptation to add more.
Okay, so stick to minimum in the MVP.
Yes, it is so hard, but it's so important.
It is.
Yeah,
okay.
Totally agree with that 100%. And you have to watch for that injected work from all comers, right? Your dev team will decide in the middle of the project, it would be great if we could do this too. Or you might have the product owner that all of a sudden decides, if we could just add this one little thing, it would make the product more valuable. But all of those things detract from your ability to make your original MVP quality, right? So watching for that injected, distractions from all sources is critical.
Okay. Mahmoud, what's your opinion?
Like from my side, I think we always think like MVP is only one unit in the company, but it's a company full of many units that you can use to validate your ideas, not only building the software itself. Like you can validate using designs, research outside. Without writing any line of code, you can have many ways. You don't need to build the biggest application, like let's say we are food delivery application right in the end. So if you want to do MVP, you don't need to do integration with restaurants. You can do like take the orders, call the restaurant by yourself and do the order. Like you don't need to build everything from scratch. You need to just validate what's useful to the customer in the easiest way.
Okay. Okay, we have a question and we have 2 minutes, so I think we'll take it from the audience. Our audience asks, when do you decide to move from MVP/POC to the full-blown project? I think we already mentioned the wow factor from the customers. So the moment where our clients really say, yes, I want it, please don't take it away, please make it just better. But do you have any other moments?
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, for us, it really comes down to what customers are willing to pay for it, right? And so that's a big success point for us when we have an MVP and we have a backlog pipeline of customers who want the MVP and then are excited about what comes next with it. And that cycle is absolutely, critical to deciding when we move from MVP to investing resources to grow the project.
Okay. So not only I really want it as a customer, but I'm willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
As always, the money will drive our decisions. All right, we have to wrap up, but thank you all so much. I think the one takeaway that I took from it is just listen to your customers and choose the right people to talk to and the right people to work on your products. And it's been really a pleasure to hear from you, dear audience. If you have more questions to our speakers, feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure they will be happy to chat. Thank you so much, and back to the studio.